Good morning and welcome to Central Connecticut State University and the downtown campus here at the Institute of Technology and Business Development. It's great to see you all here bright and early this morning. This is National Small Business Week, and about 3 months ago I got a phone call from well, one of my childhood friends who better not say anything bad about me when he gets up here to this microphone. I'm sure there's a few stories out there, but Andreas Kapitanopoulos called me. We grew up in the same neighborhood out in Belvedere by the college, and he said, Rick, our bank, Farmington Bank, is looking to do some informative seminars for small businesses during Small Business Week, and we would like to kick that activity off with CCSU and the Institute of Technology and Business Development. So we discussed a number of various topics, and we settled on preventing fraud. But the focus of this session, and there are going to be 3 others that are offered this week at various locations, this focus was on small businesses, and we've heard that, you know, companies across the country are trying to reduce costs and operate more effectively and more efficiently. And one way for businesses to do this is, of course, to look at their processes, analyze those processes, look for waste, and reduce waste. Muda, as the Japanese call it, in the Toyota production system. But a second way is to look at your business processes across the whole board, financial, operational, and identify areas where you can improve your ability to do e-commerce, business to business. And online banking is certainly one of them. We have some experts here today to talk to us about that. But when doing online banking with many small businesses, many business owners are concerned, afraid, worried about identity theft. And it is a problem. And you know, it's becoming a more increasing problem as we use different modems in the internet world to electronically communicate and transfer funds. And my eyes were quite well opened when we brought the panel together on a conference call to talk about some of these aspects. And I think you're going to have a very positive and interesting learning experience today during this session. We have some great speakers with some very interesting backgrounds on a topic that oftentimes you don't even think about until something doesn't work for you, or you have a bad experience and you want to go back and figure out what you did, and then you figure out, oh gosh, we need some electronic person, an IT person to help us, and this could have been prevented if we took some simple steps. So I'd like to introduce our sponsor, Andreas Kapitanopoulos from Farmington Bank, to introduce our moderator, and we'll get right into the topic. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Rick. So at the end of the session, we'll be in the back trading stories about Rick when he was growing up. But I think Rick summed it up very well. Fraud is one of those topics, you want to be at the forefront, you want to be ahead of the game. You don't want to be thinking about it after you've been hit with fraud. You want to try and get ahead of it and prevent it. So I want to thank ITBD, Rick Mullins, Cindy Walker for helping us sponsor this, host it, Greater New Britain Chamber of Commerce, Tim Stewart, President, Bill Carroll, thank you for co-sponsoring this with us. I think it's a great topic for us to get our arms around. We'll get it off this morning. We've got 3 great panelists, and our moderator here, Professor David Fearon from Central Connecticut State University, professors from the School of Management. He'll be moderating it, and let's make this interactive. Please ask the panelists questions and draw the expertise that they have out from them, because we want to get as much information out there as possible. So thank you very much.
Yeah, after I finished our prep call with panelists, I found myself, holding on to my wallet. Like, why are you walking around holding on to your wallet? Here's an object lesson before we get started. There was a day when if I said someone in this room intends to commit a fraudulent act and take money from you before we leave, before this is over. Looking around. Who looks honest? You know, who has a blank expression? Maybe there is some, the guy back there, Nick, Greek guy. You know those Greek guys? Nick, Pat Nika. He's actually our colleague and executive director of the CSGO Foundation, and transacts what we wish was even more money than we have some great money. The point is that back in the day, we can almost spot people who we think have the desire to reduce our cash flow illegally, and particularly in a small business. You know people on Main Street, recognize, you know their family and all of that. Those days are over. And what we're going to learn from our panel today is that the person or persons who want to harm your business or you personally are unseen and relatively difficult to detect. So let's start by going through and as a way of introducing, Mike, let's start with you, because you're marketing technology solutions to banks and other financial institutions. What's changed in the years you've been involved? Am I right that the one who's going to get you, you're not going to see until it's too late?
Yeah, without question, the change has been pretty radical in the last couple of years, never mind just 10 years. You know, up to a few years ago, we were still writing checks, and the checks were still the predominant method of moving money. With Check 21 and the government's move to basically change everything to images and move money at a high speed for clearing purposes and for any number of other reasons, is what you find is that the person who used to spend a lot of time creating fake checks or fraudulent checks, not wasting their time with that anymore. They're trying to figure out how to capture an image, how to use that image fraudulently, how to gain illicit access to your records, and use those electronic images as a way of creating the fraud. So, and that really has ratcheted up in the last couple of years to levels that never been seen before.
So here's a first example. How many of you still use checks quite often? Let's say, raise your hand if you use checks at least once a week. You write checks. Okay. So we're still using checks, but now when I take a check to deposit it, I go to an ATM and it images my check, or I'm told by my students that I can actually take a picture of my check on my cell phone. Wow. Okay, and you guys will go along with that. Pretty cool, man.
It is standard operating procedure.
Okay. Brianna Neumiller works with the FBI, and I think it was her comments in particular that made me hold on to my wallet. And so, Brianna, you are relatively new to you're not new to the cyber world, but these crimes that are being picked up by the FBI seem to be increasing in not only frequency, but variety. So give us a feeling for how that person we used to be able to detect is now more difficult to detect. And encourage us, let us know you're catching them.
We are catching them. Actually, we're just at the conclusion of probably a 9-year investigation where those phishing emails that you get where they say, hey, I'm such and such bank, give me your information. We went overseas and actually extradited a number of people who were engaged in that in Romania, pulled them back here, and they've been convicted and sentenced. So we do go out there in the world, but I think that highlights a portion of this problem, which is that it's not just the people that you interact with every day face to face. Now you've got a global economy and a global scale, so anyone from anywhere in the world can reach out to you, which can be a good thing as a small business, but on the other hand, you've got a whole set of people who can target you.
So there's an example where but it took 9 years, and a lot of State Department level work to get to Romania to find that one group.
Correct, and I think that highlights one of the things you were talking about. Part of this case, part of the reason why it took so long is there was a revision to the treaty, and we had to wait for that to come into effect, and then for us to do one of the first extraditions under the treaty. So while this threat is evolving, our tools to use are evolving as well. But the variety of things, like you said, I mean, it used to be check washing that you had to worry about. It's not that it's a new concept that there are threats to your money. It's just the techniques that they're using are evolving, and you have to evolve your security procedures to go along with that.
Chris, when Andreas introduced me, he said that something to the effect that Brianna just said, that the ways that people are trying to commit fraud are not unlike they were back in the day, but they're done now with different tools and a little more hard to detect. But there are certain patterns that I suspect that you, as an expert in the internet, can identify and help us with, so that we can be more involved of preventing these kind of things. We as small business persons and as individuals. Give us a sampling of what you see, familiar, but using unfamiliar techniques.
Basically what happens now is criminals, they go where the money is. So years ago, the money was at physical banks, so that's where they would target. But now the money is moving towards electronic transactions, so they're starting to use, I wouldn't say exactly the same methodologies, but the same concepts to basically funnel money, perform, legitimate transactions using the electronic channels. So from what we generally see is that criminals first attempt to take control of your email account, and then what they do, and the reason why that is so successful is that people typically use the same email and password combination for everything that they do online. So one thing I always tell everybody is, in my opinion, that your email account is probably the most important online account that you have, because everything gets tied to it. So they try to compromise that, and then what they do is, once they have access to it, well, then they can go ahead and attempt to reset your online account passwords. All right, they can very, very easily do that, because generally you have all communication from your financial institutions going to your email. So they can just go through your history and see, who you communicate with, Farmington Bank, Citibank, Wells Fargo, whoever. And then what happens is that your logon name is usually in there, or it could be some type of variation of your email logon name. And then basically they do a reset password on your financial institution website. That password goes to the email account that they have control over, okay? And then they can start doing, logging onto your online account. Another issues are that that they tend to look through your email to see who you communicate with at the financial institutions. So what they'll do is that they will find somebody that you communicated with previously, perhaps to initiate a wire, whatnot, and then they will basically say, email that person and say, are you in the office? I would like to process a wire, either basically process a wire on my account, or I have a line of credit, right? And then if the bank doesn't have appropriate controls in place to validate that customer, or basically perform some type of authentication outside of that email communication, you could have fraudulent wires go through as well. Other things as well is, like, if they were able to compromise your email account and compromise your online bank account, they could change authorization levels, who has the authority to change account information, who can increase wire limits, so on and so forth. So,
wow.
I mean, that's just
a moment of silence for our fortunes.
But and that's just, that's just one channel. So now you go over to the mobile realm. So people still have this disconnect that mobile phones are just a cell phone. They're a computer with calling capabilities. So all the risk and threats that are in the online channel carry over into the mobile channel. So you still have, it's not called phishing on your mobile phones, all right? It's called smishing, which is text messages, all right? It's called vishing, where they call you up, all right? And they use these different services where they can actually route calls through, so it looks like it's coming through a local number. They can purchase prepaid cell phone numbers, all right? And then basically perform attacks on that method as well. So again, they're going where the money is, all right? So as you move to the online channels and the mobile channels, that's where they will basically start focusing their attacks on.
Let's move back up the line here. Reactions to the several things that Chris shared. Let's start with the mobile, Brianna. What's the criminal pattern that you're picking up on?
And as we discussed on the call the other day, the biggest thing, which Chris highlighted to remember, is your mobile phone is your computer. If you're using it to connect to your banking account, if you're using it to send emails, most people today on their computers, they're going to have some kind of antivirus software. They're going to make sure they keep all of their programs where they should be, keeping all their security up to date. So if you have antivirus software and you never update the definitions, it's not going to help you much. So the biggest thing to remember if you're using your phone to conduct these things is you've, in essence, turned it into your computer, and you need to apply the same protections you would for your computer. Additionally, a lot of people, to save on their data plans now, they'll use Wi-Fi, which is a wireless access point. Wireless access points can be very good, but at the same time, you have to think about your trust level. If you're sending your bank account information over your phone, and you're using a public wireless point, it's like you're shouting out all of your account information and passwords.
Someone's over in the
room.
other part of the hotel lobby going, I got you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So while there is free wireless service in a lot of places, you have to be cautious of what information you're passing along that network and who else can hear it.
Who here knows, because I didn't until this, that you can put antivirus software on your cell phone? Who does that? Wow. Well, there's 4 of you. Quick, where do we get this?
Most of the major antivirus software vendors offer mobile applications now. Sometimes it's you buy a license and you can choose what to apply it to, whether it's a phone or laptop. The other solution is to not do banking on your phone, but to stick to a computer. One of the things we discussed is if you can, if you're a small business, a major source, it's not always emails that you receive, sometimes it's malicious software on your computer. If you have a computer that's being used to browse the internet, to check both personal and work emails, and to conduct a lot of things, you've exposed yourself to a lot of different places where you can pick up viruses. If you have in your company one person that does all the financial stuff, consider a standalone computer for them that's just used for banking. If it's only used for banking, you reduce the places that they can pick up malware. But if you're going to do that, they have to keep the computer up to date security-wise, because if they only log in every once in a while, before they do anything, they should update security, update their definitions, and just make sure that computer's kept up to date.
So for the small business, to have a standalone computer is what Brianna's recommending. Mike, talk a bit about how, following on, how your company's been advising your customers to build more protections in and help ultimately protect their clients, their consumers.
Yeah, and really that's a key point here, especially as community banks and credit unions begin to offer more and more small business services. It's critical that they educate downstream to their end client on the needs for security, on protecting their access points. You know, Brianna, she said it. The reality of it is you can't broadcast things. You gotta, so we spend a lot of time talking about, when we make you change those passwords, when we send out a mess to our client base and say this passwords have to be changed, and they have to have one uppercase letter and one lowercase letter and some special character. It's not to be a pain. It's not to be problematic. It's there because the more complicated you make it, the harder it is for those who are trying to compromise you to compromise you. So it is all about education. And it's also a reminder that a lot of it is, while it may be somebody sniffing a line, it could be somebody trying to do a cyber assault on your database, it's physical too. I mean, to this day, some of the biggest crimes with regards to ATMs are people standing over your shoulder with binoculars and looking at you punch in your personal ID code. So those are the kinds of things that you have to be careful of. You have to, now, there are from a technological standpoint, there are companies who are starting to move away, and you're going to see, again, it falls to your cell phone. NCR is coming out with new ATMs where you'll do the transaction on your cell phone, which will generate a QR code or a barcode, and you'll just show that to the ATM. And then the ATM will produce the cash. At that point in time, you're not punching in codes. Nobody can look at what you're doing. It takes the visual, the actual old-fashioned physical crime out of the equation.
Yeah. Chris, prevention stuff. It seems like, as it was in the virus protection world, the first ones came out. I think McAfee, and some others got into it fairly early on. And what I picked up as a layman is over the years, you just have to try to stay one step ahead of the next intention to assault our accounts. What are some of the things that you're picking up or in behalf of your bank and small community banks that banks need to be looking at, as well as bank customers, as far as these new ways of getting at us? I mean, yeah, one is to change the ATMs. In the meantime, most of our ATMs are just like they've always been. What's coming?
It's basically what we're dealing with now is that because what the banks need to do from a security perspective is publicly known. The criminals know this. They have our playbook. They know what the banks are required to do based off of regulations. So that's kind of something that's against us, because they can sit there and say, okay, we know that banks are going to do these bare minimum things, so let's go ahead and try to figure out a way to circumvent those controls they put in place. Also, the threats are evolving because the criminals know that we have antivirus, we have firewalls, we have certain controls in place. They try to modify their attack vectors so that those controls don't pick them up. So antivirus software. All right, the way antivirus software works is it looks for pieces of code that match a certain signature. So what do? They start writing code that basically constantly changes so that it will never be detected by those antivirus softwares. So rather than look at security from that state, the security landscape has changed, so we look at anomalous behavior. Okay, so if you're logging in from an area that the bank doesn't recognize you logging in from. If you're logging in from China, when you never log in from China, that will throw up a flag. All right, if you're logging in at 4 in the morning and your history shows that you never log in during that time period, it throws a flag. If you start making X amount of transactions under a certain dollar threshold, it throws a flag. So rather than look at these controls that don't really change, they don't look at behavior. All right, we actually put these controls in place that track your behavior over time, and they basically identify anomalous behavior. And then what happens is we flag certain things as suspect, and then that forces us to look at them in more detail. Perhaps call you to say, is this a legitimate transaction? Is this something you intended to do? Basically verify that that is you who is logging on and that is you who is making that transaction. So we just need to change the way, we're changing the way that we're looking at all these different channels and how customers are interacting with these channels, and we're just modifying the way that we're actually implementing security.
It's kind of interesting because back in the old day, the banker kind of knew everyone who came into the bank, the regular customers, and kind of knew that pattern. So here's Mrs. Jones again. She always comes at Thursday at 2 to put something in her bank book. You're back at looking at behavioral patterns again. Talk to us some more about that, Brianna. Is this helping by having banks being more hands-on in stopping possible crime? How is that rolling up to your field of detection and arrest?
Well, the detection aspect from that standpoint, it's in terms of prevention, a lot of that falls on the banks and the individual customers. And I think an important point of that is to be conscious of how you're using your bank and how you're interacting with your bank. You were saying before that, after some of the conversations, you wanted to hold on to your wallet.
Yeah.
Point of fact, no matter how many securities you put in place, if you don't password protect your phone and somebody steals it, you're just giving them, in essence, your wallet. So
something even more valuable than my wallet, because they can get into everything. Yeah.
A lot of things.
Yeah.
Something to keep in mind. In terms of the behavioral analysis, that can help us to identify leads if something happens and we can look at the logs of activities, things like that. We can try and identify anomalous behavior. Along those lines, if you are using online banking, check your, and I don't know how technical the audience is, but you can enable your routers at your work to log activity. And this is the case for both banking related, but other types of computer intrusions. If we don't have the clues to follow, it makes it a lot more difficult to investigate the crime. So look at, whenever you do something, look at if your account that you're accessing has the ability to turn on logging. Obviously with your bank account, that's not going to be as much of the case, but like I said, routers at your company, any websites that you guys maintain, anything like that. A lot of times it's a feature to turn on logging, but it's just a click of a button. And that way if something does happen, we can say, okay, well, every time you logged in from this IP address, but suddenly we see this other one and it's coming back to another country. Things like that. So some of it is enabling the tracking, taking the time ahead of time to think what's going to put you in a best position down the road.
How do these patterns get rolled up into the kinds of decisions that drive innovation from your standpoint? You're picking up on these patterns, and you've been watching innovation in this field since the mid-90s when you got into this work. I can understand that the FBI and the related federal agencies have a responsibility to track these changes and being able to anticipate how they can get ahead of them if possible. But over the years, are there professional societies? What are the ways that you all inform each other of these latest things so that you can arm your local customers with solutions?
Well, the good news is when you service banks and credit unions, you're servicing a regulated industry.
Okay.
So you already have to be on your game.
Mm-hmm.
Or you get visits from Brianna.
And she's a lovely person to visit.
But the reality of it is you have to. I mean, you are constantly under the same scrutiny that the financial institution is under. So you are thinking about what the next bad situation is, or what's the next attack going to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, we hire companies who will attack us, attack our firewall, attack our environments, and test the perimeter and find out where are our weak spots, and we'll validate those. We track behaviors. And this is not new. This is kind of interesting. Watch this evolve. Let's go back to physical checks for a minute.
Sure.
And even credit cards. The technology to evaluate those environments have been around for a long time. There was a company in San Diego called HMC Software who got their start back in the 80s and 90s as a skunk works for the Department of Defense. Mm-hmm. But they ended up building a product called Falcon, which was a neural product. It learned. And it watched your credit card transactions. And exactly as Chris said, if it didn't see the right behaviors, if the behaviors looked off track, it set up a flare.
So that's when we get those calls, or when they say, no, your card has been frozen. And then you go, well,
exactly. And we've extended those technologies to checks. So we've extended those technologies to online transactions. All of those can be extended. The ability is you always try to stay that one step ahead. And as an industry, it's a big focus because, frankly, we can't afford for our clients, the banks and credit unions, to get in trouble. That's because ultimately it's a trust industry. And if trust gets interrupted or broken, you're out of business pretty quickly.
So we're at a point now, and with some time remaining, that we'd love to have your thoughts and questions. I'll keep this going, but if anyone at this point would like to steer the conversation, please let us know. Okay, Jim, I think I can reach you so we can pick it up on, well, I think on camera we do,
You talked earlier about phishing scams. I must get probably individually a couple hundred emails a week that look to be that sort of avenue trying to get your information. I actually had my account hacked several years ago and had to go through this ridiculous process to try to get my information back because I couldn't even go to my email for like 2 weeks. It was terrible. and when you live on your computer, it's pretty problematic. How do you reduce your overall, your liability there in getting these kinds of scams sent your way? I mean, I do a lot of stuff on the internet, whether it's shopping, banking, everything. How can I reduce that? Is there software that'll prevent that for me, or just don't shop at Macy's online?
Start with Brianna. What
Well,
can we do? to help
There are a
Jim?
couple of things you can do. One thing is to know the policies. A lot of banks, most banks, they'll never email you. Most people won't ever email you and ask for your password. The company knows the password. They have no need for it. And if they ever need to access your account or something to that effect, they generally can reset your password and they'll email you out a new one. So know what the policies are and never to respond. If you do get something like that, whether it's a phone call, a text message, an email, don't ever respond to the item that you get. So you get an email claiming to be from your bank or a phone call that says, hey, call us back at this number. Don't use that number. Go on to your bank's website, go down to your bank, find the official number for that bank. So for instance, people get a lot of emails claiming to be from the FBI. First off, generally speaking, we don't send emails. Especially we don't send emails telling people that they're under arrest. We like to do that kind of thing in person. So if you get something like that, it's easy enough to go online, FBI.gov, and look up the number for your local field office and give them a call. If you get something from your bank, chances are you know the number for your local branch, or you can go on to the bank website, pull up the number for the local branch. Same thing, your credit card, you get a voicemail that you've got an issue with your credit card, please call this number back. Don't call that number, call the number on the back of your card, or go to the credit card company's website. You call the trusted numbers and you say, hey, listen, I got a message, there's a problem with my account. 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you, no, we didn't send that out, we don't do notifications in that kind of manner. So that'll help you out to some extent. The other thing that you highlighted is, while the loss of your money is of course a problem, identity theft is an even bigger issue, and it's very difficult to recover from that. We've had people change their names because that's the only way that they can break free from some of this stuff. A couple things to consider: security questions. How much of that information is out there on the internet right now? I mean, the hometown you grow up in, even your mother's maiden name, your favorite pet, if you got a picture on your Facebook page with your pet's name. So one of the
I gotta go change my.
One of the things that some people will do is they will come up with a profile for themselves, and that's how they'll answer their security questions. So your favorite color is green. Instead, now you have to make sure that you remember these, because if you don't remember them, it's very difficult to unwind. But instead, you say your favorite color is yellow, or something like that. Just a basic example. Trying to pick those things that are harder for someone to find. And then, again, and as Chris spoke to earlier, since so much is tied to your email account, make sure you don't use the same password twice. So don't have your bank password and your email password the same. Right?
Don't put them online, that's for sure.
And certainly complex passwords can be difficult to remember. And generally speaking, the security questions are the ways to recover if you forget your password. But one of the things to remember is longer passwords are always better. If you think about it now, you're not worried as much about people guessing your password. I mean, someone who knows you may be able to guess your password, but it's about trying to beat the computer algorithms that can go through and find your password. And so in that case, longer passwords are going to help you out. Sometimes you can take a couple of words and mash them together so you remember them, but it's harder to guess.
Crystal, I have a question on here, but let's get your reaction.
Just to give you some information. I mean, when it comes to, obviously, the things that you always heard for years: don't click on links in emails, don't download attachments for people you don't know. For instance, go type in the actual website of the email, and then basically see whether or not there's actual, legitimate communication. Also, with a lot of web-based emails and a lot of actually online accounts now, and a lot of banks, they're providing out-of-band authentication. And basically what this does is that, yes, you go to the website and you put in your traditional username and password, but to complete the logon process, you receive a text message to your phone. And it's a unique string of characters, and to complete the logon process, you type it in, and there you go. So I always say that convenience always trumps security, but I mean, when a website or a bank offers these extra security features, I highly recommend to at least try them out and implement them and see whether or not, you know, it's something that you want, because really it's only that one extra second that you need to do, or that one extra step you need to take to make sure your information is secure. Now, to your question of how do you remember all these passwords, those applications that you can download your phones that will basically securely store all your passwords for you for websites. So I have one that I use. If you want, I'll give it to you after here. I don't endorse products or software. I just tell people I use it for my own personal use, and I'll let you know what I have. But basically, you can go ahead and put all your websites in there, and then you put what the website is, what's your username, what's your password, and it basically encrypts the information on your phone, so you don't have to worry about you know, remembering all these passwords. They even have applications now that randomly generate passwords for you, so you don't have to worry. Oh, I use that password over on, you know, my 10th website that I have a username and password on. That you can randomly generate them. So, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of the third-party email email services like Gmail, Yahoo, whatever, they have out-of-band authentication, so you can actually receive that one-time passcode to finish the logon process. And that's another way to further secure your access to your email.
You had a question?
No, just
Oh, I'm sorry, then you, go ahead.
Oh, no, you can take that one.
Okay. What was your question first, sir?
Oh,
You have to yell it out, because I can't hear, sir.
Somebody hits him on, earlier about, you know, people contacting about this. My wife had a phone call about 2 weeks ago, they said there's a warrant out for your arrest. Called the house 2 times. She called me and asked me to do it. I said, well, if they had a warrant, they'd probably come to the house and arrest you. But what are they trying to do there? Gain access to the information, I guess? Or?
Could you hear that okay? Yeah. The question for the camera is, a call comes to the house, you know, there's a warrant out for your arrest, terrifying whoever answers that call. What's behind that? What are they driving that terrified person toward, Brianna?
And I do just want to point out, I don't expect any of you to be under arrest at any point in time, but if that situation ever occurs, the easiest thing to do is say, who are you? And like I said, call the main number for that organization and find out what's going on. But one of the things that they're driving with this is just to capitalize on people's fear, and they'll say, well, we have a warrant for your arrest, but if you pay a $200 fine, you just buy whatever the card is, send us the number, and you know, you'll pay your fine and we won't arrest you, things like that. And I've seen letters.
It seems so
where,
obvious, though. I mean, do people fall for that?
It does, but
When you're terrified, I guess you do.
get
Yeah.
people afraid, and there's a trend, I don't know how many of you have heard of ransomware. There's a trend where people will get messages on their computer
Oh, your
saying
grandson is,
that, or there's something, we detected some kind of illegal activity on your computer, this is the FBI, you know, we have, if you don't pay such and such a fine, we will issue an Interpol red notice and you'll be under arrest. That is not true. Sometimes the mechanism that they use is actually just a pop-up on your computer, so people think that their computer's locked down, but really if they just hit escape, it kicks it out. And what they're relying on is they can send so many of these out that even if 100 people say, no, I think that's fake, the 101st person clicks on it and they get money.
there goes their identity. Your question now.
No, I was just gonna say, is anybody interested in those emails anymore? I mean, you get hundreds of them. Is there any time you should contact anybody or forward them, or there's just so many of them around you're looking at them?
There's a website, it's the letter I, the letter C, the number 3.gov, G-O-V. It's the Internet Crime Complaint Center. It's a great resource. What the Complaint Center does is any kind of internet-related fraud or crime, you can fill out a form. There's pretty straightforward questions. You want to save whatever information that you have, and they take that information, they aggregate it, and they say, okay, we have, you know, you may have lost $100, but we've got 1,000 people that lost $100. Or in this case, you may have realized that it was a fraud, but someone over here didn't, and the email address that these two emails were sent from is the same. But maybe there's some additional information in yours that the person who sent the money back didn't have in theirs, or it's an earlier version where they put a contact information that tied more directly to them. So they can take that information, find new trends and warn people about them, but also through that, because the crime can be so widespread, they can take cases across the country, pull them all together, and say, we've got a major problem here.
Sort of like your civic duty to, if you take that extra step to try that ICE, that helps the people at that level to look for those patterns again. I'm going to throw a question out to you, Mike, and I guess it's for every banker in the room and as well as every small business person. It seems to me that this activity is increasing the overhead or the cost of doing business, the cost of banking, the cost of doing business as a business, and also it's increasing the cost to us as we have to acquire these different preventions. Is this inevitable now, and should we not be anticipating in our long-range budgeting to increase the amount that we have to pay to protect our bank or to protect our business?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a paradox, isn't it? The reality of it is we want to use these cyber methodologies to deliver services to our end clients, which makes it more efficient.
Sure.
And makes it more efficient for the small businessmen. So the small businessman, in days past, once a week, maybe twice a week, you gathered up all your checks and your big wad of cash and you put it in your bag with a lock on it, and you went down to the bank and you walked into the bank and they processed you through. And who's got time for that anymore? And second, you don't have as many checks to process as you did at one time. You're not doing as much in the way of cash. You're dealing with a new generation, a Gen Y, who may not even come into your business. They may only transact with you online. Mm-hmm. And so you have really no choice but to do to put these kinds of tools in place to run your business in the hopes of gaining efficiency.
Sure.
But at the same time, you are seeing some cost increase to protect yourself. And I think, yes, it's an inevitability, and the banks understand it. They understand that it's a cost of doing business, and they are going to invest in it because in the end, as I said before, it's a trust business, and they have to protect that trust. And the dollars spent to protect that trust are critical. And so I think you have to understand that it's going to be that way. I think the one note that I would say is don't forget about physical security. It's still as rampant and still as big a problem of, Tim, you asked earlier, leaving out that little pad on your desk with all your passwords on it is just as dangerous as anything else. So
snapping with a cell phone.
Absolutely got to be careful with that.
What about that from your perspective, Chris? It seems to me that you're representing kind of a new occupation in community banking as well as larger banks, a person who understands all this and is constantly studying it and then helping the bank, prevent these kind of frauds or at least deal with them after the fact.
I mean, the reason why it's constantly increasing is because you have to look at how the crime is being perpetrated. So years ago, and if you wanted to steal money, you actually had to go to a physical location, which was basically limited to the geography of the bank. All right. Now, that geography has expanded globally because a lot of these systems, a lot of these channels are available online. So we have people constantly from overseas that have access, that can get in contact with our systems, with anybody's systems online, and they try to attack them. So our attack vector has increased exponentially because of the global nature of the internet, right? So we're not just limited to our physical presence anymore. It's an electronic world, it's an e-commerce world. You've heard of the Internet of Things. So everything that we do now is going to be on the internet. Everything we're going to be doing now is going to be on a mobile phone. So every single time you transact with another service, that's just another avenue for someone to attack. And
wow.
But I mean, at the end of the day, you have an option. You either don't use it or you do use it. If you do use it, it's like anything else in life. There's a risk involved with everything you do, all right? But you need to understand what the risks are and understand how to control those risks.
Other question, yeah, Nick?
Yeah, I just wondered what your thoughts are on non-regulated currencies like the Bitcoin and how wide open those things are to fraud. It seems to me that it's like a big target for fraud, but just wondering what your thoughts are on that. And is this really the wave of the future?
Why don't you start with you, Mike?
Yeah, well, outside of the other issues with Bitcoin, the Bitcoins, the PayPals, they are the wave of the future. They are seen, frankly, it's a competitive issue for bankers, right? You're as much as PayPal is can be an assistance in some cases. It's also a competitor because Gen Y sees it as a bank, you know, for all intents and purposes.
Use PayPal?
And they use
I have to
PayPal.
check
It's the
with
way
Gen
they-
Y
it's the way they
whether
move their
they're-
money. You know, PayPal has done a good job. I'll use them as an example because I'm more familiar with what they've done interactively with our technologies. They've done a good job of securing the deck and really building some significant firewalls and understanding how to protect that. And I think, you know, that doesn't mean that they're impregnable and that they won't get hit. They will. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But I think those are things you're going to have to deal with. And you know, when I look at my clients, my credit unions, my banks, they have to see PayPal as a threat and as an associate, and the Bitcoins as a threat as an associate, and kind of find some middle ground, but recognize that whatever we do technologically, we've got to still build the firewalls, build the protections, and constantly test against it. And work very closely with our friends at the FBI to do that.
Brianna, I know that I've been reading, you know, that Bitcoin has been one way, allegedly, that money is laundered and so forth. What's the update on Bitcoin from your perspective that you get as an officer of this world?
Well, we approach digital currencies come and go. You may have heard of Liberty Reserve, which was a big currency. Depending on how they're structured and how they're put together, I mean, Mike talked about PayPal. PayPal puts a lot of protections in place, but when they say if you buy something on eBay only use PayPal, and someone says, well, I'll just wire the money directly.
Ooh.
There's all those protections that they put in place, but all it took was one person to bypass them, and once the money goes through a wire, there's all those protections go away. So with digital currencies, like Liberty Reserve, one of the benefits of them for people engaged in criminal activities is sometimes they're less regulated, sometimes they're designed to be more anonymous. So instead of our existing banking structure, you're going through a whole other structure, often in another country. And I think as with anything else, you have to understand the risks if you decide to use those. I mean, if you suddenly decide to start paying your customers in chocolate bars, what kind of tracking is there on that kind of sale? What kind of methods do you have? What kind of recourse do you have if something goes wrong? Because we do occasionally have people come to us and say, you know, I lost something, but I moved it to another country. It's over there, and I lost it over there. And you have to keep in mind that while we have a very broad global reach, there's certain things where if you take it outside the U.S., you lose some of those protections. I'm not saying don't conduct transactions internationally, but keep in mind what the policies are in the host country and what the protections are there as well.
Because Chris, you picked up on the fact that while we call the Farmington Bank, for example, a community bank, that community is now global. And that people can be legitimately transacting with your bank from wherever they are in the world, on the one hand. On the other hand, though, it puts you out in the same community, if you will, of every other highly exposed financial institution. So what's your sense of the Bitcoin question? We'll get one more from the audience after that.
Well, generally banks tend to wait for regulations to basically be passed before we actually take action on something. So right now, Bitcoin is still, I would say it's still kind of in that unknown phase, and everything that I know about it and everything I've read, it's used a lot in money laundering schemes and stuff like that, and criminal activity.
Or to get around the banking industry.
Correct,
Or
yes.
anything that's regulated.
Yeah, and the last I understand, it's not a regulated currency at this point, so how the value of a Bitcoin is determined, it's not tied to any type of monetary standard, so the value fluctuates. So because of that, the banks are tending to stay away from it at this point, but who knows, years from now, where because it starts becoming a more mainstream method of transaction and currency transaction, the bank may take it up for banks in general, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yes?
Software. Many of us have small or even micro businesses, so we don't have the benefit of having IT for ourselves. Chris, you mentioned some software. We have computers in our homes. We don't have all that time. So, you know, is it Norton? Is it Malwarebytes? Is it doing this once a week? For those of us who need some procedures for small businesses or our home, who do we trust? It seems to be a matter of trust. And where do we go for that?
There's a multitude of resources out there online. Microsoft, I know they have great resources online. You go to Microsoft and you type in Security Center, there's a lot of how-to guides for home users, for small businesses and stuff like that, best practices. There's also SANS, SANS.org. They have critical controls that you put in place, you know, best practices. Any others that you know about?
Let's go right down the line. Brianna, what would you suggest for those of us who definitely now, after this meeting, are going to go right out? I'm getting rid of the word taffy from my list of identifiers. I know that, much as I love that dog. So what should we, where can we go for help?
Well, and we don't endorse specific products over others, but the FTC has some resources and guides. Like Chris said, you know, any of the major security vendors, if you're using Windows-based software, look at Microsoft. If you're using a different type of software, generally you can go to forums and things like that, and there's a lot of information out there. And you can read, it's one of the beauties of the internet, instead of people telling each other face-to-face, you can go out there and see how other people have rated products, the problems that they've encountered, and the strengths and weaknesses of different things. Unfortunately, it does take time, but you have to consider it an investment in your business. I mean, security is an aspect that's not going away. We talked about convenience over security, which is always something to try and balance, but because of the risks associated with it, you do have to try and take some time. And while there are a lot of great tools out there, if you take a tool that you're not that familiar with and it's improperly used, you can create more of a headache for yourself.
False security, yeah. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, what you're going to find is that your community bank is going to have to be more of a consultant to you. I mean, there's going to be some things that they're going to want you to do. Because they're going to say they want to help you grow your business, right? So and they do. So they want to help you with cash management. They want to help you with transactioning, all those kinds of things. And they may be coming to you and saying, look, we have this great internet-based cash management tool, or we want to put a RDC or a remote deposit capture device in your facility so that you never have to walk into the bank with checks again. You're going to just scan them all right there and send them to the Federal Reserve. They're going to have to come along and teach you the security pieces and be very consultative in their nature, working with you on those kinds of environments. And I think that's going to be critical to them selling those services over time. And then they're going to come to us and we're going to have to help them with that as well. So it's this chain of commerce a little bit. On the other side of the coin, when it comes to your individual computers and your individual IT, don't underestimate Geek Squad. You know, I mean, it sounds, you know, from Best Buy or any of the big providers.
Come down to our campus,
there's reasons why they
of
offer these services, and you need to follow those things. People get a little lazy, a little sloppy on that part, and that's where the danger really starts to come in. And you know, as Brianna said, don't make that password 4 characters. You know, make it, the longer you make it, the more complex it becomes for somebody to get at you.
Let me just lob one big question out as we're moving into our last few minutes. Like every other risk that we pay for, our home, risking our businesses against disaster, what is the trend in ensuring cyber risk? Anyone? As a business or as an individual, ought we to be looking at what that industry, P&C, is doing to help ensure these risks, if at all? What do you know, Chris?
I see the trend increasing, that businesses and a lot of other small and large are basically buying cyber insurance. But from my understanding, and when it comes to actually paying out, there's strict underwriting guidelines in the sense that they want to make sure that you have these controls in place.
So that's the whole point. If you haven't done your homework, then they're saying sorry.
Right. So those underwriting guidelines require that you have these certain security controls in place, that they're operating effectively, that they're being reviewed regularly. So that is my understanding of it. And from a payout perspective, I've seen mixed reviews, and that's largely dependent upon the situation and you know, what your security state was in your environment, you know, during the time of the breach or the time of the loss. So no breach, no hack is the same. The methods can be the same, but the impact, the magnitude, what was lost, they all differ. So you're really comparing apples to oranges with it.
So this is a whole new field, you know, for the insurance industry. They've got to be out there getting schooled as fast as they can on what you all know, and then deciding if they want to absorb that risk, and assume otherwise, that even if you do pay for that insurance, it's going to have to be very tight, and you may not recover anywhere near as much as you may have lost. We have a minute now. Last advice for our great audience here. Mike, what would you like them to walk out the door remembering particularly about this hour?
You know, if you're a small business and you're implementing these tools, don't fear them. You're going to need them. You're going to need them to be competitive and to do the things that you need to do to be successful. Work closely with your community bank. They study this stuff. As you can see, I mean, they're not the community bank of old. They bring specific staff on board to help you with these processes. So work with them and take very much to heart what the FBI says to you and the others. There are threats out there, but there have always been threats. You don't stop because there are threats. You work within the realm to protect yourself, and you continue to advance, and I think you'll find yourself in good shape.
Brianna?
I think one of the important things to remember is, now you guys have some additional information. I imagine a lot of you have some employees. When you have these online tools, when you're accessing them from both home and work, you have to consider your work computer or your home computer an extension of your work. So the same things that you'll do for your businesses, you need to do at home, and the same things that you do, you need your employees to do at home if they're accessing your networks from there. We talked about kind of trusting the source of things. One of the easy methods for people to get around some of your protections is if you use a personal account to email your employees over, someone trying to gain access to your systems can set up a fake account that looks like it's yours. So anytime you get something, just look at the source and look at the trustworthiness. If you get an email telling you to transfer a lot of money, maybe give the person a call and say, hey, did you send me this? Or if you have a supplier you deal with regularly and you get an email from them telling you to send money to a different place, call them up and say, hey, I got this change. Did you send this to me, or did somebody slip in? You know, like Chris said, when you have links, when you have things that you're accessing, look at the source of them. Check to make sure that what you're clicking on or responding to is a person that you actually think you're responding to, clicking on, visiting.
Know your source. And Chris, final advice from you?
So I mean, everything that we're going to do in life involves risk. I mean, the only way to eliminate risk with online banking or your digital world is literally to unplug yourself from the internet. Turn off your phone, and that's it. But obviously that's not what you're going to do to grow your business, expand your business. So, I mean, you really need to understand the risk associated with the activities that you're doing. This is anything in life. Understand what controls are in place. So when your bank goes out to you and they start discussing with you all the different cash management products, and they start talking about the ways that you can protect yourself, you know, the controls that they look for, they want you to have in place. Understand those controls, understand why you need to do them, understand how you can make sure that they're operating effectively. All right, and it's like anything, it's just another facet of your operations that as a small business, you need to understand what the risks are and how you can actually protect yourself. So when you go to sign up for these new services, ask what are the controls that we can put in place. Just have a general understanding of them. Implement them and see how much more of your time it requires to perform or implement those controls, because I guarantee you that extra second or two, that control is going to make you take your time and enter this other password or the other passcode. It's way better than having to deal with calling your bank and try to recover funds or having fraudulent wires go out. It's literally a couple more seconds, and it's going to prevent a lot more headaches down the road.
And I think my final word is another reason to value our community banks is that there are these products that are coming along, and they have the expertise not only to show you these products and help you install them, but then to work on the protections to make sure those products are not subject to fraud. So Farmington Bank, and I assume others, have made a big step in a direction that gives me a lot more confidence. And I would like you to share with me now my thanks for an extraordinarily informative panel. Thank you all again. Okay, Rick.
Thank you, David. I'm just going to put this up here for a second. What an informative session. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, how much is too much? Is it too much to lose $5? How about 500? How about 5,000? How about 5 million? If you're an individual and you're living paycheck to paycheck, how much is too much? What protection do you as an employer need to have in your workplace to protect your business? How much is too much? How about your employees? People are good-hearted, they work hard. I believe that from the bottom of my heart. People are hard workers. They're determined to do a good job. As employers, what are you putting in place when you're asking those people to do extra work, or they're doing it willingly from home? Are you reminding them of the vulnerability that you're placing their personal finances and the company's finances? Again, nobody does these things from home on their own time without wanting to do the right thing by their company. That's why sessions like this are so important. You'll normally hear from me, what's the gold nugget from today's session? You know, I couldn't categorize all the great gold nuggets we heard here today. There was just so many good ones. From a personal perspective, from a business perspective. That's why it's important to attend sessions like this. And I see Sean and Mary Rogers here who are involved in our New Britain Network community. They're an IT company that works with many small businesses locally. How many companies do you folks run into that have been in business for a very long time? And they're very vulnerable for security risk every day, every minute, because those computers are on 24/7. And we're fortunate to have forward-looking organizations like Farmington Bank that are willing to step out of the normal realm of their doing business to bring informative and interesting topics like this to our community so we can all be better informed. And it's great to have Tim Stewart, another neighborhood colleague from New Britain here, and the Chamber, and supporting these kind of events. And that's why it's important for you to be part of the Chamber in your community and be active in that Chamber, because through these interactions, you will grow your business, it'll be successful. You'll have many opportunities you didn't have. And as a CCSU alum, I'm always excited to have alumni on our panel like Mike Nicastro, an expert. Worked in the business community many years, locally as a chamber president, Tim, correct? I think greater Central Connecticut Chambers of Commerce, and now back in the private sector. But again, with a focus on the business community. And the folks from the FBI who are willing to come out here, Brianna, thank you very much for taking the time. This is not normal activity. They don't get these normal requests to come and be on a panel. But look at the breadth, depth, and interesting content that was brought to today's session. And Chris, once again, great to have you with us, and Farmington Bank's support for helping businesses grow. Because small business is the backbone of our economy, both in Connecticut and in our nation. And as educators at the university, we want to bring you these tools to help you grow your business successfully. So hope you have a great week. Please take a look at the website from Farmington Bank to review their upcoming sessions. Tomorrow it'll be leveraging technology at CCAT over in East Hartford, utilizing social media at the Central Connecticut Chambers of Commerce on Thursday, and accessing loans on Friday at the Lyceum in Hartford. Andreas, closing remarks.
All right, thank you, Rick, and many thanks again to our panelists, Mike, Brianna, Chris. Great information, and thank you for the questions from the audience, because I think those really brought in a lot of information for everybody. Rick, ITBD, thank you again. Great New Britain Chamber of Commerce, Tim, thank you very much. And now we'll bring it to Chris. Can you grab the raffle, the most important part of the day?
I think we should let our panelists draw.
Yeah, has anybody not put a card in? So if anybody hasn't put a card in, everybody, if you guys have a card, drop it in. Yeah, hey Bill, it's only one card, please, not 10.
He has 4 or 5 identities.
Yeah.
I don't see passwords on these cards.
Yeah.
If I hand them back out, could you please give me your password? Sure, I'll take a credit card. Got 2?
Check it out.
So we have 3 prizes.
You each get to draw one. Keep everyone in suspense. Miranda, you get to go first.
Insurance Associates Incorporated.
All right, Paul.
Hitchcock Print Production? Pat?
Congratulations.
New Britain Chamber of Commerce, William Carroll.
Fix.
You get your choice of gift cards. You just fill out the information, mail it in. So if it asks for social security number, mother's maiden name, I'd skip that part.
Good job, Chris. Great job.
And David, once again, David Farron, thank you very much. Great moderating. You really just kept the flow. Really appreciate it very much. Thank you.